We are back to iTunes, back to this awesome setup here, and most importantly, back with another video. Today's video is going to be an awesome special all about the iTunes setup here, and I have a lot of stuff that I want to talk to you guys about, so I guess we should just start from somewhere. Now, first off, I know it's been quite a while since we last saw the iTunes setup in action, and you might need a refresher on what's actually here, and I myself actually need one because I haven't used this setup in over a month at this point. So it'll be nice to see what we actually have here, what we're working with. We're going to be improving the setup. Even though it's been quite a while, it hasn't all gone to waste because I have a ton of new additions to the collection, and some of those additions will make significant improvements to the setup here. So we obviously have made videos about the iTunes setup in the past, the very first one being a detailed overview of everything in the setup. The very last one we made was about installing this desk area space, basically leveraging the floor space that was previously just being occupied by that metal shelving cabinet and this CRT monitor, which was right in front of it. And what we did is we took a Sony Trinitron box alongside that metal filing cabinet, and we basically made the L-shaped desk into a U-shaped desk. So it's kind of like almost like a command center type of thing just for iTunes and other random nonsense. And it is a helpful addition to have here, but it's just not being utilized as it should be because right now it's just holding my mini disc deck. And yeah, that really is not a good place for it to be. This is even worse because it's literally just the 2012 MacBook there and just an iPhone 5, an iPad mini. What is this? Lightning to USB camera adapter. It's a terrible organization method because there is no organization. I literally had no other place to put that. But it is definitely a nice convenient area for whatever we want to put there, just not the mini disc deck because it's not even hooked up. We are pretty familiar with the rest of the setup here. Obviously we have this office chair which has seen some better days, but honestly for this setup it's perfectly fine. I guess we can move this out of the way so we can get a closer look at everything here. So we are pretty familiar with the setup as it is. This monitor, as you may have seen in a previous video, it's actually testing out a new machine, which we will get to in a second. But this right here has not been touched at all. I mean, the only thing I did recently was unplug the main power strip to use this guy for the iPhone 10 I'm currently recording on. By the way, we will actually upgrade that in a sense later on. None of this has really been changed at all. The only thing I really have done is place more things here, mess up the cable management, or the very little amount of cable management that there was. It's completely out the window. It's terrible. It's obviously not perfect. You can't really see it, which is a nice benefit. I mean, if you have the monitor here, it looks perfectly fine. But this is, yeah, it's not fun. It has to change. Even though it is technically usable in its current state, it's just not efficient at all, and it's very difficult if I want to add or remove anything. In fact, I have, like, the FireWire cable's unplugged. I don't even know where it is. Everything here is just a mess. It's all underneath this, on top of that. But over here, it is relatively clean because this is the only area I can really work on. But what we're going to do is, I'm not going to touch this at all because it took quite a bit of time and effort just to get everything in its place. And this is actually really nice. As you can see, it's great for storing things, and that box is pretty durable, so it can take quite a bit of things on top of it. The main setup here, I really don't see this changing too much. Obviously, cable management is definitely something that I want to improve upon, and despite my best efforts, it's still a mess. But apart from, this section, which is most likely going to stay, this section right here is definitely going to be removed, as well as the boxes that everything here is sitting on. One of the main reasons why I want to change this as much as I do is because when I made this setup, I didn't have this, but now I do. And you may have seen the video about it, but it's this. Yes, it is a Power Mac. Even though it looks like a Mac Pro on the top, we now officially have a Power Mac on the channel. This right here is going to be an excellent addition to the setup here. I have a ton of stuff that I want to do with this, but as you can see, it's literally just been plopped down on the side here, and cable management is non-existent. In theory, I can get everything plugged in, up and running, and use it, but it's a terrible layout. It's really not the way I want to continue using this setup going forward. Not to mention, I have this Dell Inspiron, which we have seen a long time ago. I do still have that Dell, and well, we'll not talk about the keyboard. Yeah, the keyboard itself is its own thing. The reason why it's like this is because this is a filthy keyboard that I have not gotten around to cleaning, but I don't have any extra keyboards, which is hilarious considering I have a ton of them. I mean, I even have this. Very awesome accessory, but it's only usable for 30-pin devices. I have an absolute crazy amount of keyboards that I honestly just don't even want to use because they need to be deep cleaned. This is the lazy way of dealing with that, but this cannot stay either. As you may have seen, we do have a nicer keyboard here. Unfortunately, space doesn't work. So half the things you can do with this keyboard, it's unusable. It does still make a nice USB hub, and the rest of the keys pretty much do work with the exception of some of the extra special keys or whatever. It's a nice keyboard. I really do like this Apple, I think it was like the A1048 model number keyboard. It's great. It works well with the Power Mac, but I mean, you can't do a lot without the space bar. Everything has to be unplugged, replugged in. Like, I don't even know where the FireWire cable is because this thing still needs a proper hard drive installation. There's a lot of content that I want to do with this guy. There's a lot of cool projects I have in mind. This area is going to be the ideal filming spot for stuff like this Power Mac. So back to the setup here. From a distance, it looks okay, but like I showed you earlier, the closer you get and the more time you spend looking at it, it's a mess. I have a bunch of these particle board pieces, which I do think that we can take advantage of, but as it is right now, it's pretty placement. Right now, these here serve nothing more than decoration because these are just on normal boxes. This kind of gives it a more professional type of look. Not really, but I guess it kinda. On the right side here, I do actually have an iMac box, and I also have some other interesting boxes. You might see little sneak peeks there. Everything on the right side of the iMac box theoretically can be moved, but it's going to take a lot of time. However, what I do think is more manageable, at least in a shorter time frame, is to take everything from the iMac box all the way to this extension here, take it all out. I'm probably going to find another spot to place the cardboard boxes and maybe somehow put that extension, basically turning it from an L to just a really long desk. That'll be for directly up against the wall. For this area here though, I have something else entirely in mind, and we will get to that. However, I don't want to spoil anything. Well, let's just say some assembly is required. But as you can see, a lot of floor space here is just being lost. Like I said earlier, the setup as it was initially intended does work. You know, if I want to use iTunes, listen to music, things like that, it's an excellent system. But as we've started to kind of outgrow the setup as it is, we're definitely going to have to improve everything. There's a CRT right there. That is my Panasonic VHS camcorder. There's a Sharp box. I have stuff in there. I think I had stuff in those boxes, but I can't exactly remember. It's been quite a while. Those boxes will all have to find a new home or be reintegrated into, you know, just a more efficient layout. A lot of floor space here is just being lost, considering the amount of new things in the collection and even just existing things that I haven't really spent any time on. This area is going to be a great test bench retro area. It's still going to be officially called the iTunes setup. I pretty much left everything as it is to show you guys our uses have outgrown its initial design. So I guess the best way to get one last look of everything is to start off from the mini system, go to the left here. I'm not going to touch that at all. It's going to stay the same. Same with most of the desk here, but like I said, we need to remove stuff in order to actually get some progress done. So the mini system is model number CD-ES777. We also have some miscellaneous nonsense on top here. This is the USB powered PC fan that I made a while ago, which I also made a dedicated video about for the Airport Extreme. And the reason why it's not plugged in is because I typically only use this when I'm using the setup. You know, sometimes I might do more with Ethernet things, so it does help keep its temperature down, but I just don't want to leave this running all the time until I get a more permanent cable solution. As you may or may have not seen in the video about making this PC fan, you know, I may do with what I have, but whenever I get heat shrink tubing and something more permanent, I'm going to redo the fan so it looks a bit more professional. Next up here we have the antenna for the mini system, and then we have some software CDs that I have completely forgotten that I even put here. This is iLife 05 and macOS Leopard alongside macOS Snow Leopard, and they're just on top of here because I don't have another place to put them. Next up we have the core component of the iTunes setup, the black MacBook. Now this is a 2008 model. I think it has 2 gigabytes of RAM and a 320 gigabyte hard drive. We went more into depth, especially on the software side of things, in the initial video about the setup here, but because this has a bad inverter board for the LCD, this is running more as a Mac Mini, a special black edition of the Mac Mini. It's nice to have, and it does get the job done. We will have to figure out with the cable mess how to make it a little bit cleaner, but it's been running well, especially on a mechanical hard drive, and it's just a nice plug-and-play solution for the hard drive. Now this is a Seagate, I think it's also a 320 gigabyte hard drive. It's obviously external, it has FireWire and USB, but obviously because it's a Mac, we're always using FireWire here. FireWire is still the best standard, and I'm still going to be using it. I don't care if it's considered obsolete or anything like that. I mean, this is a 2008 MacBook. Obviously this is considered obsolete, so I don't care. It's fun to use. It's awesome. Casually has some old iPhones and iPod Touches there. This is the core component of the iTunes library. It's where everything iTunes related actually lives. It's not on the MacBook. Now, even though this does have the raw files from The Office, in fact, we can actually get it right here. Now, even though the black MacBook has the DVDs themselves saved onto its hard drive, everything that I have music related is onto that hard drive. Now that hard drive is also a little bit messy because it has not one, but 2 macOS installs. It also has a whole bunch of extra files that I removed from a hard drive, which will be discussed in a later project, but basically I just wanted to get a hard drive clear. So that has a lot of files filling it up. The main partition that the iTunes drive is on, which is also on a macOS Tiger install, is pretty much full because of file transfers and things like that. The hard drive itself, it's its own thing. Some things I think I'll just delete that I don't need or I have copies of. It's basically a digital mess, as is this is the physical one. It does get the job done, and I have used it quite a bit alongside the Power Mac. I was almost going to call this a PowerBook because I've only had a PowerBook until now, but yes, I do have the Power Mac. I still can't believe I have this. Yeah, it's here. It's here to stay, and it's never going away. I don't care that it has cosmetic damage. This thing is an awesome machine. But I was using FireWire alongside this and the external drive because I was also using it kind of like an overpowered hard drive, like tester, basically transferring files and things like that. Again, we'll get more into detail about that when we actually do some dedicated videos on this, but I was taking advantage of the macOS installs on that. However, that's really not the way I want to continue using this hard drive. Maybe I'll have a separate partition for one macOS install. I think what I'm gonna do is probably take all the files off here, at least iTunes related, put it into a safe place, maybe onto the internal hard drive of this, give that a good reformat, and put everything back on, maybe make a couple partitions. There's a lot of potential here, but storage itself is not going to be much of a problem for me anymore because as I mentioned, I got a ton, not some, a ton of cool new things in the collection. So I think that might just stay a dedicated iTunes drive. It's something that I can talk about in depth upon. I really don't know what I'm going to be doing. It still works for now, so I'm not really going to do anything with it. Very interesting history. You know, at this point, I might just leave it as it is. I don't know what we're going to do. Next up, we have all of the power inputs for everything, because everything has to be plugged in, obviously. Now that is a APC power strip. It is older, but it does get the job done. And I think we might actually have to install a secondary power solution here, because one of these is not enough. When you count the mini system, the MacBook, the hard drive, that's 3, and then you count the Dell monitor, that's 4, and this only has 6 inputs. The rest of the inputs went into this monitor and into the Power Mac, so that obviously fills everything up. So power itself is also going to be another in-depth topic. There's a lot of things we can do. I will be reusing that power strip, but we're definitely going to have to improve our power solutions. If we go over to the side here, nothing really has changed from the airport side of things. We made a whole video about the airport as well because it was giving us some issues, but I can happily report that after leaving this plugged in, it has not given me any issues whatsoever. So it was definitely a constant power cycling issue because I like to turn that off completely when I'm not using it. Leaving this plugged in all the time actually fixed its problem after we made it work again, of course. This switcher, which we also talked about in the initial video, now this was for switching audio between the MacBook itself and this MacBook, the 2012 MacBook here. Now, I was mainly just doing that, either listening to new music or taking advantage of the speakers on that for the MacBook. It's something that we can take out and easily add back into the setup. For now, we're going to take it out just to make it a little bit cleaner, and depending on our use case, we will probably, adjust things as we see fit. Technically, it's for consoles or AV equipment, so we do have composite and S-video. We might be able to take advantage of that, but I really don't know how we can integrate that yet. Now, the Dell monitor and the Dell keyboard are both here to stay. I don't think I'm going to be removing them at all. In fact, I'm probably going to be adding more monitors to the setup because, like I said, now we have the Power Mac. I don't know about the Dell. I was using this because more hard drive related things, but the Power Mac is definitely going to be a crucial component of the setup here. So we're going to be needing a lot more monitors here. And no, I do not need a KVM switch. I already have enough keyboard, mice, and monitors to go for pretty much every system that I have. A lot of the monitors I have are not super fancy, but they get the job done. This is just a VGA monitor, but it's widescreen and it actually works really well. These Dell monitors are really robust. They have USB hubs, DVI, VGA. Some of them have DisplayPort or HDMI. Some of them even have composite video input, which I did not know was a thing, but apparently they do. I think it does have the power supply for the soundbar, but I don't have other soundbars that I think of. Or actually, I think I do have some more, but some of this stuff is just so messy. I should have been making a list of what I have, because I know I have multiple of some things. We have to start somewhere though. As I said earlier, we're probably going to be keeping this portion of the desk setup. That one has PC accessories like VGA. The bottom one has some power bricks. So for the most part, they are pretty organized, but I don't know, I'm probably going to have to revisit them. And last but not least, as we already saw a couple of times, this section of the setup is also not going to change. I was thinking about installing some sort of CRT monitor in the corner there. However, I don't think I'm going to go that route because A, it's on a cardboard box. B, it's going to take up a lot of space that can be used for smaller items. And C, we might be able to put a CRT monitor in the new setup, or like the refreshed setup area here. I don't know, there's a lot of options, there's a lot of things we can do, but the most important thing is to actually have a clean canvas so we know what we're working with. Now, the CRT monitor itself will not move at all either because, well, I don't have a permanent good spot for it, and neither do I have anything to put in its spot as it is on the floor. It's in an okay spot. I'll just leave it here for now. I mean, it's not exactly a tiny monitor. It's the same width as the filing cabinet, so I think for the meantime it'll just stay there. And the other good thing about this area is that I have a ton of floor space that I can take advantage of. Obviously, the CRT monitor and the PowerBook, I called it again a PowerBook because I haven't had a Power Mac. It's a Power Mac, not a PowerBook. The Power Mac itself is also not a small computer. This is, well, compared to that Dell, and yeah, the Dell itself is already a slim computer, but man, it's just a huge machine. These are not small objects, and I still have a ton of space to work with here, and more than enough space to move around freely, or if I want to sit down on the chair, I can easily navigate to every single part of the setup. We also have, like I showed you earlier, a ton of floor space that I can take advantage of. I just have to think of how to actually reuse this area into a much more efficient way. I really can't say anything for certain until we really know what we're working with here. Enough rambling aside, we got to get all this stuff out to improve the setup. Before we take a look at that, I want to take a look at this real quick. So, as you may or may not know, this is actually the charger for the camera I use, which is an iPhone. Who would have guessed? Now, I know this charger is overkill because this is obviously for a MacBook, but it gets the job done and it does have some advantages. Right now, as it is, it's kind of inconvenient because the lightning cable I have on this is just the average lightning cable and it's not exactly long. The extension itself is very nice and handy because I can move this around anywhere, but if this is on the floor, I'm pretty much limited to how long the cable itself is, and well, I can't have that going around because, well, that's just not a good idea. So what we're going to do is we're going to swap out this cable and give it a nice upgrade. So am I going to swap out the brick? No, we're actually going to swap out the lightning cable. There's the old cable and here is the new one. So as you can see, I have plenty of slack within the cable. I can freely move around the entire setup and not worry about being next to a wall outlet, worry about the iPhone battery. I can just record and, you know, not worry about power at all. Even though this is a larger charger, it does come with its own advantages. One of them obviously being faster charging, but the other is that, you know, depending on wherever I place it, it's not as likely to fall over compared to something like the iPad charger. Even if I tug on the cable, even a couple of times, it's not going anywhere. So I don't have to worry about that. The larger cable itself also means that I can leave it on the floor and not worry about it at all. Probably spent way more time than I was expecting to talk about just a charger, but this is a very crucial part of the setup here because how else am I going to record these videos if I don't have the phone plugged in? Otherwise I have to keep waiting on the internal battery to charge, and if some recordings have to be re-recorded, then I've just wasted the battery. The overpowered charger is a game changer, especially for areas like the iTunes setup. Definitely worth it, and made it a lot easier to set up the camera on a tripod. So I think that the best course of action right now is to just get rid of all the clutter on the desk, so like the keyboard, the Office box set. This is actually the iPhone 2G. We've also got, an iPhone 4 there, all of the cabling nonsense. I'll probably leave the AirPort Extreme plugged in and just leave it on the other side of the setup because I don't really want to deal with the network stuff right now. I'm just going to leave it plugged in. Everything else, so like the MacBook, all of its cablings, the external hard drive, everything will be removed from the setup. So I don't know where I'm going to put these, but I keep the iPhone 2G with a microfiber cloth to keep it safe. I'll probably just put this with some other DVDs. This wireless mouse really isn't an issue. The adapter is actually in the Power Mac, so I'm just going to leave it on top of the Power Mac. This is the remote for the mini system. Again, really easy to move. I'm just going to put it onto the side here. This keyboard, it was already unplugged anyways. So this will be wrapped up and put onto the side here. Now for the monitor, I think it was plugged in last I used it. So yeah, we do have to unplug the power cable and the VGA cable. And I typically don't fully secure the cables because I'm always moving things around, but is this one actually secured? Okay, so VGA cable unplugged, just toss it off and move the monitor out of the way. That is actually quite dusty, so I'm probably gonna have to wipe some of this stuff off. Here's the MacBook. Here's a whole bunch of cables. And yeah, this side just got worse. So the air port is still plugged in because, well, I want to leave it plugged in and only really move it when I need to. And then over there, that's the MacBook charger and just a couple iPhones, iPods. And this is, well, everything's unplugged here. So we have the Seagate hard drive. This is the APC power switch. It does have a pretty nice heavy-duty cable, so it's a great addition for the setup. This is the power supply for the hard drive. Here we just have one of the stereo audio cables for the mini system, and here we also have my FireWire cable. So I think this is my only actual FireWire 400 to 400 cable. I do have a couple with FireWire 800 and also with 1394, the Sony iLink type connector. Anyways, I know that this is a thinner cable than most FireWire cables. First off, it's an official Apple cable. And I've always been using that specific cable with the hard drive. Even after hours of usage, it still works just fine. I think this one actually came with the earlier iPods or maybe the Apple iSight, but you know, it's a FireWire cable and it works great. Over here we just have the cooling pad alongside the rest of the Mac Mini cables. I keep calling it a Mac Mini, but it is of course just a MacBook. But based on the way I use it, it's more like a Mac Mini. So visually it looks the same, but it was pretty dusty, so this is definitely helping out. So yeah, let me just remove all these things from the desk, give it a good wipe down. As a cable just fell into the abyss there. And I guess I should really unplug these cables remaining in the Power Mac. So there's DVI, there's that audio cable. This is for the USB keyboard, Ethernet, and power. So we can freely move this out of the way now. And we have all these cables here. Yeah, gotta deal with that. We still have all these cables here. Yeah, definitely the proper way to remove all these. So the desk itself looks clean, but that's just because we put everything here on the floor. So yeah, we still have to deal with it, but it is good progress. So, well, this is really easy. Just gotta get the Dell out of the way. And then I will put these in a safe spot for now. And now it's Power Mac time. So it's not super easy to move this because of the damage, but it's doable. The last time the setup was like this was obviously way before the Power Mac and probably even before the reinstallation of the MacBook. Obviously the MacBook and all the Ethernet nonsense in the back there, that was an integral part of the setup, but in terms of everything just being clear here, with the exception of the mini system, yeah, it probably hasn't been like this since I made the setup. I'm going to give them a quick wipe down because they are still pretty dusty and I really haven't cleaned the setup since I made it. Granted, it hasn't been around forever, but, you know, it still is pretty dusty. Now, it probably won't show up super well on the camera, but here where the Mac Mini was and all the power stuff, it is kind of dusty, probably because there was some active cooling. So yeah, you can definitely see this is helping. Same goes for this area, which again, it's not super noticeable, but it does still have some dust on it. Finally, some real progress is taking place here. That side does not count. So obviously we still have the mini system and the stuff on top, but that'll be easy because I'm probably just going to put those things over there for now. The antenna will stay with the mini system because that's obviously part of it, but all we have to do is just unplug the speakers, remove the mini system, and this area is basically done in terms of things on top of it. The drawer cabinet thing is really easy to move because that just has wheels. I'll wheel it out of the way. And the iMac box has a handle, so that'll also be easy to get rid of. There's a lot of boxes here, but I'll find a new place for them. Everything here was already pre-existing, and I basically just put the wooden pieces on top to make use of the setup. This is basically the last time we'll see it like this. While the area is also clear of stuff, I'm going to give the floor a nice quick clean because might as well. I was able to actually take out the entire mini system like this because it was on one of those wooden shelf pieces. Obviously, I can place it like this back in the setup, or I can always adjust it, but at least for removing it, it was extremely easy because I did not have to mess with the speaker wires. You can tell that the cart itself hasn't been moved in quite a while because, well, it doesn't come across on camera very well, but there was a small indentation in the carpet. It's obviously just carpet, it'll go away, but yeah, it was pretty funny to see that. So here is the current setup. Obviously this part wasn't changed, and in fact you could probably say that it's worse than usual because of all the cable nonsense. But if you pan over to the right, you can see that we have all of this space now available to us. Now, if I wanted to further extend the setup even more than I already have, I could go even more to the right, but as you can see, there is a big metal shelving unit in the way. If it wasn't full of stuff, I could easily move it, but because the floor is currently occupied by everything we just took out, I have to find a new spot for those, and then I'd have to take everything off the shelving unit because it currently isn't in the best state. I don't want to show off too much because there's some pretty cool things on it. So I think what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take some of these extra shelving bits and I'm going to kind of like block off the ends here so we kind of have like a wood facade type of thing to close off this section. As you can see, it's just, this part is just an empty area because that was actually occupied by, you guessed it, another CRT. Yeah, it's a big mess as it is. It's an organized mess, okay? I do try to find the most efficient ways to organize everything that I have. And even though on camera it doesn't look all that great, the work that I did here freed up a lot of space and it made it even more usable. So I'm hoping to achieve the same with this setup, get even more space out of it, move the boxes somewhere else where other boxes can be. I don't plan on using them like a desk because the Sony box itself is pretty tall, but the tallest boxes here, they had to be on top of other boxes in order to be roughly around the same height. And even then, it's not perfect like the Sony box. With the remaining drawer thing here, we're going to push it against the wall so it extends the normal desk even more than that. And because the boxes took up a lot of floor space, having them out of the way frees up this entire section here. So I can put other things there, but most importantly, I have an awesome addition to the setup that'll go probably right here. This is where I think it'll make the most sense. I don't have it assembled yet, but that might give you a clue as to what it is. So I took some time and I came up with this. It's obviously not perfect, and if I get a better idea, I may change it, but I think this will actually work out pretty well. And considering the rest of the setup has worked out really well, hopefully this will too. Now I put a shelf piece in the back here to give it a nice clean finish, basically just to end it off instead of it just being a dark void. And then I did the same thing with this here. I took two of them, and because I have some boxes on the bottom here, this will also end it off in a clean finish. While this part of the desk is at the same level, the end here is actually shorter. But I realized I have something that'll fit perfectly here, and that is the shelf. So this area can be like the network area. Maybe we can have some sort of extra Ethernet things, maybe a network switch. Who knows? There's a lot of potential here, and this actually works out pretty well. So this can be in its own little corner while we still have this entire section available to us. And I also came up with this just now, but the iMac box, I might actually put it here so that way it kind of wraps around the setup, and I can put another one of these shelf pieces on top to further extend it. If that does work out, then we might even have a level shelf because I can put the rest of it, on top of this. I will have to get the iMac box and place it here to see how it looks, but if it does work well, then I will probably keep it like that, at least for now. So at first I wasn't sure how useful this area would be with the iMac box. It does give me some extra space here. We basically extended the L to this section now, so it's basically double the size as it was before. I wasn't entirely sure what to place here, but then I realized, wait, I still have the mini system, and that's on its own wooden piece. So this is actually fairly stable. because I have this other piece here, which is a solid piece of wood. This is underneath the other two pieces there, so that keeps it level. And then the mini system can be on top of this, so it would both close off this section. I wasn't sure how much I would access this area anyways, but if I have something like the mini system and then the network area right there, that makes great use of this section while I still have this available extension to the current setup. Once all of this is in place, I'm going to get rid of the other boxes on the floor just so I have some working space. I do also have this extra shelf here, but even when I place the mini system on top, it'll be up to this level and it'll just be the same height. It does overhang a little bit, but if it's not too much of a problem, I might actually put this piece here so we don't have like this sticking out. It'll be like that, and it'll just give it a nice cleaner setup. We already have the wood grain here, so I'm gonna place it down, see how it fits. So here it is with the mini system in its new spot. It has the extra piece alongside the one that it was sitting on, and I do have one more of these wooden pieces. If I wanted to, I can place it in the corner so that way it's actually the same height, but then one of the speakers would not be at the same height. And at the same time, you know, it's not like I'm gonna be sitting in this area and working here. So I think this is actually turning out really well. Here is the final result, at least for now. So first off, it was definitely worth getting the other shelving piece out because now it actually matches the bottom half, and with it being a black shelving unit, it actually matches really nicely. I know that it's not exactly 100% flush and level, but it really doesn't matter because the most important part is that the mini system is on the shelf with stability. The network area worked out perfectly without me even planning for it. Now this is turning out to be a very cool and a very functional setup. So as you can see, we've basically doubled the size of the main setup, and we have all of this real estate now. So I got rid of the boxes that used to be here, got them out of the way, put them in a new place, and all we have left here is the Samsung monitor, all the cables that were in the setup, excluding the ones that are in the Dell monitor still. And I've moved the airport to its potential new home. Again, I'm not 100% certain on what or how this is going to be laid out, but for the meantime, you know, it's not bad. Cable management will be its own thing, but at least we have the main setup almost established. There's still a lot of floor space here. So we're gonna move on to phase 2 of this project, and that is the new installation in the setup. So far, what we've done is just take out what we had pre-existing and modified it to accommodate a larger area. As it is right now, I am really satisfied with how it's turned out. We're going the extra mile to make it that much better. So in terms of cable management and reconnecting the MacBook alongside the hard drive and the speaker system, I'm gonna hold off on that for now because we're not done yet. Check this out, guys. The wait is finally over. So the thing I was talking about, assembly, well, this is what we're going to be putting potentially in the center or maybe off to this side of the setup. So if you thought that the gigantic U-shaped design of the setup, the new version, did not make any sense at all, well, hopefully now it does. The reason why I wanted to expand the setup even more is because we now have a proper piece of equipment to install in the setup. So we're not just using the drawer cabinets with some shelving material. We have a fully fledged proper desk setup. We obviously put in all this hard work just to make this setup possible, but now we have something even cooler to go with it. So this is actually a piece of hardware from the Meatball store that also sells furniture, and this is actually the Meltorp desk. So I think this is a 29 by 29 inch table. It also has a metal frame, and honestly, for the price, this is one of the best value for money tables that you can buy because, well, you can use it for basically anything. You can use this as, you know, a kitchen table, an office table, in this case, the ultimate iTunes setup table. I've had this for a while now, but I haven't actually gotten a chance to even look at it, but I wanted to do it on camera, and now I can finally do it. So what we're gonna do is we're going to unbox the new desk and set it up on camera, and then we'll have the final result. I think the table legs are slightly taller than the actual base cabinets, but it really doesn't matter because this is awesome and I can't wait to assemble this and have this a part of the setup. As you can see, it's pretty well packaged. You would hope it is for a brand new product, but what we're going to do is we're going to leave the tabletop off to the side for now and take a look at the frame because, well, I mean, we can't put the top on without the frame. So it's definitely an upgrade from the plastic cabinets and the wood shelving, but these have served me very well and we obviously are still using them. Like I said, we're just expanding onto the ultimate iTunes setup and we're making it that much cooler. So on the box for the frame, you can see the frame itself. But very shortly, we'll be going from just a picture to reality. So we have one tape over here. The second one, we have the box open, for the most part anyways. And here is the frame. So we need to get this out and start building. So first off, we have the instructions, and then we also have these things, which is to hold the table with the frame. You'll see very shortly how those actually work. And then we have, I think this is part of the top part of the frame. It's not the leg, but we'll just have to double check. These two are actually zip tied together. And then down here we have the necessary screws alongside a handy wrench to assemble it. Some cardboard spacers so that way they don't obviously damage each other because again, it is a metal frame. So this, I believe, is the actual leg, at least one of them. The top part of the frame, here's the last piece. And I believe that in these sections here, that's where these metal pieces go. If I move these into frame, they are actually different sizes. So we will have to see which goes where. But I'm pretty sure that the legs are all identical. So we have two here, and then we obviously have two more. And then we just have some extra paper, which I'll just leave in the box. And it doesn't look like much, but right now, this is the future ultimate iTunes desk setup, the very beginning. That's what the table looks like, at least, you know, once it's actually assembled. I will give this a quick look over. I'll also get everything out of the packaging. Oh, and this is actually a fold out. So it looked like it was a thing, like a book, but it's actually just a fold out piece of paper. So, yeah, we got to get everything out from the plastic and start assembly. And with that, we have everything unboxed. We have everything laid out in front of us here. So those are the legs for the table. We have all the necessary hardware, and then this will make up the frame itself. Yeah, you can definitely see that two of these are longer than the other. And yes, I did actually get the zip tie off without cutting it, so I guess I now have an extra zip tie. So with everything open here, I started to take a look at the instructions. We do have everything on the material list, which is obviously a good thing because how else are you actually gonna assemble it if you don't have those? And then I started looking at the instructions, and what do you know? You actually need the tabletop surface in order to even begin assembling the frame. So here I was thinking, oh, I'll get the frame done and out of the way, but no, I actually have to get the tabletop itself now, move all of this off to the side, and, well, then actually begin building. The frame is off to the side, the tabletop is back, and first off, you do not want to cut directly into the tape here, because if you do, you'd be creating a nice big scratch line on your brand new desk. Now, I'm going to be cutting off this part here, just like that, because, well, there is a little bit of space here in between where, you know, the box is and the table. The box is slightly bigger than the tabletop, so we don't have to worry about this section here. And depending on how much this is going to allow me, I might try and see if I can get it out without cutting this part, but if I have to, I'll just cut it off, and the rest will just break away as I lift it up. So it kind of works, but yeah, I'm not going to do this because it's just going to break the entire box. I mean, if you wanted to, you can, but it's easier to just cut the tape. Because this part is already open, I'm going to cut it this way, at least the initial part. And with that cut, I think I should just be able to tear the tape. Just like that, we now have our tabletop. So let's see, what's the easiest way? Just, I guess, pull it out from this end. It looks like there's some documentation inside, which I will double check. But the box is out of the way. You know, this is the top part of the table, and the bottom part has the insert for the frame. And just like that, we have a tabletop. So the first step here calls for the hex screws, the metal frame, and plastic spacers. So we will be needing these, those, and one of the screws is actually here because I want to show you that this is indeed a threaded insert. And if we take the screw here and twist it on, it will actually screw into position. This is what's holding the metal bar onto the desktop itself. And if we remove that real quick, you will also see that we need to use the larger pieces here because that's actually where the screw goes. The smaller ones are the secondary support bars, but these are actually what get attached to the desk. And in fact, they can only go in one orientation. As you can see right now, that's not lining up. Neither is that side. Well, it's not a problem with the bar, you just have to have it in the correct orientation. So if we line it up here, you can see that that gets lined up and that gets lined up. So this metal support bar will be attached on this side with these pieces on the inside as well. So it'll be basically like that. And this gets copied over to the other side over there. We're gonna install this real quick and then move on to step 2. I've got the tripod and the iPhone right in front of me, and it might actually sound better because I'm closer to the microphone, but I'm going to try and capture as much as I can, at least in terms of not having to move around all the time. So the first one just snaps into place. They really don't take much effort, it just, you know, clicks into place. And with that, we're halfway done already, at least with this. Next, we just have to line it up as best as possible, put in the 2 screws. So this is the first hex screw being installed. Let's see if I can hand tighten this first. If it actually goes in the threaded insert, that is. And I don't want to over tighten this just yet in case we need to adjust. Then we also have the other one here. So just do the same thing. But that is, for the most part, installed. Like I said, I'm going to tighten it down later. So I could flip the desk if I wanted to, but, well, we just saw the install process. I'm going to skip the other one, and just like that, the other side is installed. Step 2 calls for these. So I think this is just like extruded aluminum or something. It's just a chunk of metal, but the purpose of these is that they combine both of these metal pieces together and basically assemble the frame. They actually have several functions, one of them being obviously connecting these metal pieces together. The other is to install the bolts that connect the legs to the frame. So they actually go through this, and when everything is aligned properly, that is how the legs get attached. We just have to secure this on all 4 sides. As you can see, those 2 are already installed, but then we have to do the other side as well. And then after that, we move on to the legs. So even though these legs look identical, they are actually different because depending on their placement, it'll either look normal or out of place. So as you can see, this one has the threaded insert here, but if we place it in this orientation, then the leg sticks out. So we have to actually get the correct leg here. Even though it looks the same, it actually lines up and it looks correct. First off, I'm going to tighten off these screws, make sure that they're not going anywhere, and then we'll add the remaining bolts here and attach the legs. So everything is now tightened down here. It is not going anywhere, and we just have to align everything. So got the bolt here with the washer. Now the metal piece itself, the extruded aluminum, doesn't have any sort of threads to align it. It's just a hole. The leg obviously has threads, So we just need to get everything lined up correctly, and it's going to be a little bit difficult here, at least for the first one. So the legs are assembled, but I still have to tighten everything down, double check that nothing is going anywhere. But apart from that, assembly is pretty much done. Right now we're at this stage, and then we will be at this stage, and just flip it over and it's done. Everything is now installed and tightened as much as possible, obviously without over tightening because we do not want to break anything, but it's really solid. Everything is looking really good, and honestly it's a really fast desk to assemble because there really isn't that much hardware to begin with, and it really doesn't take that much time. I could probably do it in at least half the time if I wasn't actually recording the entire process here, but I wanted to bring you guys along because of course, this is history in the making with the iTunes setup here, and it's an awesome addition to the setup in general. You know, not even just like iTunes stuff, but just, you know, an extra desk is always handy to have. But yeah, it's an awesome build. All we have to do now is flip it over. So here it is on its side, and let's see if I can do this one-handed. There we go. Check this out, guys. This is awesome. Hands down, actually hand down on it. Very cool build, very worthwhile. You know, I still can't believe this is actually here now. This is going to be incredibly useful with the iTunes setup here. I mean, it was already pretty useful as it is, but there's only so much I can do with the pre-existing stuff that I have. But with this, you know, it's like a whole new world of possibilities has opened up. We're definitely going to have to integrate the Power Mac somehow. There's plenty of room underneath for it. Just a lot of potential here. We have all of that extra space that we still have to actually utilize properly alongside this now. So we already have things like audio taken care of, networking, you know, a lot of potential with that. There's just so many cool things we can do with this setup, and this has now just given us even more exciting things to actually look at. It is now a little while later, and as you can see, the desk is in its new home, and seeing this here actually like physically take up space now, it makes me wonder how else we can actually utilize the rest of the setup. And although we could rearrange everything again, I'm not going to do that because obviously it already took quite a bit of time just to get it set up as it is right now. And secondly, I actually want to use the setup. I will probably leave that for maybe another future video, potentially expanding it even further, maybe making use of the wire shelving in the back there. That's going to be way in the future because I do have a lot of extra things to reorganize and to move around, but I am happy to see this in its current state because it is actually making use of the space more efficiently. We have the mini system on its own with the iMac box, and we have this entire clear desk, which I hope to keep at least a little bit clean. A lot of things are probably going to end up being on top, like that section over there. I want this to at least be a functional and a relatively nice looking setup. There's always going to be room for improvement, but this is honestly a really good start. So one of the features that I really like about the desk is the fact that the legs themselves take up virtually no space considering how much actual desk space we get. So it's a really nice compromise, and it means that gigantic items like the Power Mac G5 will easily fit underneath with room to spare on both sides. Now for the Power Mac and finding a proper spot for it, I think it actually makes more sense for it to be right on the side of the desk instead of underneath, because we actually have even more floor space available. So it only makes sense to properly utilize it and also give the Power Mac good ventilation. You know, obviously the intake is going this way, and then the exhaust would not be covered by, or it wouldn't be blocked by the box there. It makes more use of the floor space, and it also helps out the Power Mac in that way. And we also get to look at the case design instead of it going underneath the desk. That also leaves potential for other things underneath, such as maybe, you know, another different computer, whether it be a Windows PC or something else. I don't know. There's lots of potential for that spot, but in terms of Power Mac placement, it's going to go right here. and all of its accessories like the monitor, keyboard, and mouse will go like right on the side underneath and then plug into the back there. So we get to have a nice cool view of the Power Mac, and we still have all of this free space available to us underneath. I know that I haven't talked much about the damage on the Power Mac itself, and while this is a pretty severe example of damage on a case design like this, the G5 and the Mac Pro case design, it honestly could be worse. So for starters, with an aluminum case like this, once it's damaged, there's really no going back unless you can somehow magically like remove the deformities in the metal, remove the stress marks. It's not like there's an easy fix to this, which, you know, is not a great thing to have, considering on the acrylic case design you can easily remove scratches and make it look better than it already is. But because it's in the state, I really won't be that worried about accidentally giving it an extra scratch or something. Obviously, I'm going to be careful with this, and I'm going to try and keep it in as good of condition as possible. But because it's not a mint condition example, I won't be worried about it all the time, and I can actually use it as a Power Mac. So for example, I do have some pretty good mint condition examples of iPhones and iPods and things like that, but because they are in really good condition, I don't really want to use them that much because I don't want them to get damaged. But because this is already in this state, well, it's not like it's going to get any worse. And on the bright side, the back side of the Power Mac, as well as the front side, and pretty much every other side except for this, still look to be in really good cosmetic shape. So this is pretty much like the only bad viewing angle, and once it's actually, you know, sat upright, it actually looks pretty good. Yes, there is also a little bit of damage on the handle here, but it's barely noticeable when you're actually looking at it top down, and considering this will be on the floor, you know, you can't really notice that at all. The only bad side about this is that you can't easily remove the door. Yes, you can remove it, but you just have to be careful of the metal because it might spring up. But even with all the downsides, I still love this machine. It's a really awesome piece of equipment to have here, and I can't wait to use it even more. Plus, I mean, what's stopping me from getting another Power Mac? So yeah, we can have a damaged example and we can have a brand new example. Not sure if I'm going to get another Power Mac, but hey, at least I can do this with this Power Mac and not worry about its structure integrity. I have seen damage on other Power Macs where like half of this assembly is detached, but how many Power Macs can you actually hold like a grab handle and still actually use it? You can even make music with it. Joking aside though, the way I am actually supporting this is by using this long flat wooden strip here. So this actually goes in between the detached portion, and on the side that is actually connected to the Power Mac. Once this is upright, I actually have a small block of wood here that'll go in the center, and that basically supports this side while keeping it from tipping over, because the legs here are slightly shorter because they are kind of bent in. So we're going to put the Power Mac in its new spot for now, and maybe down the line I might actually make like a custom wooden frame or some sort of bracket to actually support the bottom piece. But for now, this gets the job done, and it actually works surprisingly well. So the Power Mac is almost stable, and then once we place this here, you can't even tell that it has anything wrong with it. And there it is. The Power Mac G5 is now officially part of the iTunes library setup, and it's going to be an awesome machine to use. It still looks timeless with that aluminum design, and it goes really well with the new desk. So once we get this all set up, it's going to be an awesome machine to use here in combination with the MacBook. And the Power Mac itself will also get its own dedicated video, because we still have to actually take a proper look inside the machine. It still needs a good cleaning, because even though this case has amazing, you know, ventilation, it also means that it can accumulate a lot of dust. So it needs to be cleaned out, and we still need to install a proper hard drive into this. But after that, the software side of things, we have so much potential here. I want to install all the compatible macOS versions on this machine. We're still using the Seagate hard drive as the bootable disk image, but man, it's going to be so much more advanced in terms of that. Lots of potential here. I'm really excited to start using this. but we still have to finish the setup here and at least clean it up a little bit because that is looking absolutely terrible, even though it is still functional. By the way, the Power Mac is actually level. So I'm looking at the new setup we have here, and I'm trying to think about the best way to take advantage of the space that we have. So first off, let me just mention real quick with the mini system, I will be using this as the main speaker output for both of the machines, such as the MacBook, the Power Mac, and if we do install some sort of other desktop or whatever we use here, we will be using that in terms of audio. However, if both of the machines are powered on, only one of them will take priority depending on whatever the use case is, and the other one can just use its own internal speaker. Now the Power Mac and the MacBook both have internal speakers, so audio shouldn't be much of an issue. However, in terms of upgrading audio, I want to do a dedicated video just on that because one major thing that I want to include in this setup is the mini disc system. I do want to use mini disc here. Obviously we can use it with iTunes, play back music on it and just have fun, but this is going to get a separate video entirely after we do a baseline setup configuration here. So that is something that I will be doing in the future. Next up we have the airport, and in terms of internet access, networking, things like that, like I said earlier, I want to do another dedicated video just on that because I have a whole bunch of extra things that can take advantage of the setup considering I now have the space, and hopefully the power situation for everything will be a bit more refined than it currently is right now. With those two out of the way, we're going to move on to the MacBook. Now the MacBook here, as you may or may not know, does not have a functional inverter board. So what that means is that even though the built-in LCD does function, I don't have a backlight, and because of that, I cannot properly take advantage of the built-in display. Now even though that may seem as a disadvantage, the advantage that we do have going here is that I can use it as a custom 2008 Mac Mini, and even though the power situation is definitely, not standard, and I don't have as many ports as a Mac Mini, it does get the job done, and with a setup like this, you can't even tell that you're using a MacBook. I will talk about how I want to arrange the MacBook and the entire setup we have here, but in order to do that, I got to talk about the power situation real quick, because, well, there's a lot of stuff that we got to power up in this setup, and, well, it's a pretty important part, especially in how we want to place everything. So we have two outlets here that we can easily use. We do technically have more to the left and more to the right as well, but there's obviously stuff in the way, and I would have to rearrange everything and plan accordingly. Everything would have to be changed. These are the two outlets that we're going to be taking advantage of, and we will be plugging in the 2000s APC power strip here, as well as the 90s beige power strip there. So now that I know that this works, I will definitely be integrating it into the setup here. And this one I've been using for basically forever, so I know that one works. And they're going to be plugged in, and I want them to be on this side here, which is, again, why I want the MacBook to be here. The Power Mac itself will also get power from one of these power strips, and I want one of them to stay powered on all the time for the network stuff, and everything else to be turned on whenever the setup is in use and then turned off when it's not. So I don't want, the MacBook and the Power Mac to stay plugged in. I want them to be completely off whenever the setup is not in action. Same goes for the mini system. But in terms of the network stuff, I want that stuff to stay plugged in. I think we want to have one power strip here and then another one there for the network stuff. If there is not enough room on this power strip, the primary one for the PC stuff, I may use the other one for low-powered devices like the monitor and maybe the mini system, but we will have to see what we're actually dealing with. So I'm going to actually remove this setup. Our main focus is this, and to get the MacBook up and running. After the MacBook, we will be directing our attention to the Power Mac, but we will obviously need a keyboard, mouse, and another monitor. I will probably use the same wireless mouse right now because this is the most convenient thing I have. I do have extra keyboards, monitors, and even mice, but a lot of that stuff has to be cleaned. It will be later down the line where we get a nice looking setup, but right now we just want a functional setup. Now, even though the MacBook itself is not a Mac Mini, it does have its own unique advantage because I can just unplug it. Because of course this does have MagSafe. Probably not ideal to do computing and then just, whoops, unplugged it. But obviously this is stationary, and even though the battery itself doesn't hold a charge, again, it's stationary, it's not going anywhere, so unless I like, oops, then it's not that big of a deal. And then we have the actual iTunes library. Now, something that I noticed lately is that I happen to have a lot of Seagate drives. It's not like I chose one brand over another, but I just happen to have a lot of Seagate hard drives. So this is, of course, one of them. One of those portable hard drives there. That's also a Seagate. The other one is actually a Fujitsu. But I'm also using a 2 terabyte external Seagate hard drive as my backup for all YouTube related things. I do have some normal 3.5-inch Seagate hard drives, but I do also have other brands. I'm actually not sure if I have any Western Digital drives. I'll have to see the hard drives that I do have, but I know for a fact that I have a lot of Seagate hard drives, and they have all worked really well. If you are wondering how I actually organized the MagSafe cable and why it hasn't fallen off the built-in clips here, it's because I took the built-in clip on the cable and I set it to the length that I wanted in terms of like how far away it is from the power strip and how far it actually needs to be plugged into the MacBook, and it actually works really well. So of course I'm going to use this again. I may have to adjust the length, but that is how I'm doing it. The power strip that we'll be using with the Macs will be the beige power strip. And if we compare it to the white on the desk, you can definitely tell that yes, this is beige and it's awesome. And it is from the 90s because it says so. It's from May of 1994. And it also has the option to be wall mounted, which is really cool to see. And considering how old of a power strip this is, it is really nice to see that it's still basically in brand new condition. It's a full 3-line surge suppressor. We have a classic looking power switch here with an extra LED because why not? And if we power it up, it not only has a nice click, but it has both a neon indicator as well as an LED. At least I think it's an LED. And yeah, it's just really cool to see this in action. So hopefully I can put it to good use. You know, it'll definitely match the theme that we're going for here. It won't look out of place with the wood grain. We also have a reset button and a very nice cable, which is still in basically brand new condition, just like the plastic on the power strip itself. All of the cables that are coming from the monitor directly are kind of organized, and I know that there is room for improvement, but at the same time, I don't really want to spend too much time with this section, primarily because it still gets the job done, and I might improve this in the future by finding higher quality cables, maybe switching out to DVI. If we take away the blue USB cable, you can see that this is actually a pretty clean setup. So I did spend a little bit of time whenever I first made the setup to make it as nice as possible, and I am pretty happy with how it turned out. So the Dell keyboard itself is also nice to have because this is all you see in terms of cable, and the cable management is relatively clean. You can't even see it unless you're looking underneath the monitor. And the keyboard itself is also nice because it has 2 extra USB ports. Not to mention that this also has its own USB hub with 4 USB ports, 2 on the side and 2 on the back. And this really helps out in terms of USB on the MacBook because that only has 2 USB ports. So this is a really versatile setup. These Dell monitors are really handy to have, and the cables themselves are sort of managed because I did actually connect them together. But because this is not a top priority, this will probably get its own dedicated video in the future in terms of upgrading the setup, maybe switching over to a wired mouse because I don't necessarily need a wireless mouse, but it is handy to have because I'm usually switching between different systems. But for right now, it will stay as it is. So that kind of fell. Don't worry, it's fine. I'll get to networking in a moment. But in terms of the MacBook here, I've done a little bit of work off camera. And as you can see, this is the final placement that I've come up with so far. Now, it may look a little bit cramped, and it's probably not exactly what I was thinking, but it does actually work out well. So, first off, we do have plenty of space for the mouse with the mouse pad, And the keyboard itself is a little bit off to the left, but hey, that's what the desk is for. So we have plenty of room there. And I have pretty much everything plugged into the Mac. So obviously we have MagSafe for power, we have Ethernet, we have VGA, FireWire, the USB hub from the monitor, and the USB powered fan base thing that elevates it from the desk and it gives it some extra cooling. So for power, we of course have the 90s beige power strip there, and so far we have the monitor, the hard drive, and MagSafe plugged in. Now I wanted the power strip to be horizontally, and ideally the MacBook would also be horizontally. So basically kind of as it is, but you know, flips 90 degrees. But I can't do that because the cable on the power strip itself just isn't long enough. It is long enough to actually stay and, you know, of course, do its job. I can't have it coming from the right side there because it just wouldn't stay in place, and it doesn't really look nice when the cable is coming out, you know, this close to the monitor and stuff. So I wanted to leave that section clear as well. So this will do the job for now. And I know that the MagSafe is taking up a little bit of that outlet, but that's not actually a problem because we can just plug in the mini system. And in fact, that's how it was with the other outlet. It actually works out great because I want the outlet on the mini system itself to also be within the same circuit. I don't want it to be plugged in all the time. And we still have two outlets available for the monitor and the Power Mac itself. So we will have the monitor here, the Power Mac will be fine, and then in terms of keyboard and mouse, you know, those accessories don't need to be plugged in. So this works out great. Next up, I have to unplug the airport itself, fix it a little bit because it can't stay like that, and then we will be using the APC power extension lead for networking. So this also works out great because this one is actually a little bit longer, so it will easily go over to that side. And the reason why the airport is like that to begin with is due to the fact that I was testing out the pre-existing cabling that we had in the setup. Remember, I haven't changed any of the cables, it's just the way that they're being utilized that's being changed. So for example, the cables that go to the monitor have been organized, and it worked out really nicely. The Ethernet cables, though, are a different situation. The yellow cable going to the MacBook is perfectly fine, and it's more than long enough. However, because the airport is actually farther away from the Power Mac than what it used to be, the blue cable does technically plug into the Power Mac, but obviously the airport has to be like that. It shouldn't stay like that. The easy fix for this right now is to either leave the airport directly on the desk or moving the stand to the left and putting it on top. And there we go, networking is back. So it's obviously not the best solution and it doesn't exactly look the best, but it is functional, and like I said before, networking will get its own dedicated video because there is so much potential here. But right now, the important thing is that we are online with Ethernet, and the blue cable does actually make it to the Power Mac. But it is broken on this end, but it does still function. So I will be leaving it like that for now. So in case I do want to get online with the Power Mac for some reason, I do have Ethernet. We will revisit this, but the important thing is that the other power strip is connected, it will stay on, and it actually looks better than I expected it to be. So we still have plenty of length on that cable as well, so we can even move it more to the right if we decide to do that. With that, I think I will power this up just to double check that everything is working, and I realize that I actually forgot something very important. The mini system isn't actually connected to the MacBook, so I will get the audio cables in the back there, hook everything up so they are connected, and then actually try it out with iTunes. Right now for testing, I have the audio cable plugged into the MacBook and it's going directly into the mini system. And the reason why is because I need to get another one of these cables out so I can properly split it up between the Power Mac and the MacBook. But again, for testing, this will work just fine. All we have to do now is power up the system. We do have video, we have the mini system. It's doing its demo mode right now. Turn it off with the remote here, but I should power it on actually. We have the hard drive, if I have indeed plugged it in actually. Okay, yeah, there we go. Hard drive is spinning up. And this actually reset to CD instead of input. Yeah, okay, so that is set up correctly. The MacBook is not actually powering on. There we go. Just needed to move the MagSafe a little. So unfortunately, I do have to pause the music because of copyright, but the iTunes setup is back. The MacBook is back in action with the hard drive, the Airport Extreme, and of course, who can forget about the Sharp Mini System. By the way, the only reason why the audio cable is like this is because I was having some connectivity issues, but it works and it sounds excellent now. So I'll fix this off camera, but the iTunes setup is officially back. And it's crazy to think that within the same video of rearranging and reinstalling the setup, we get to deal with the Power Mac now. So this still needs its own dedicated setup here, but we have the perfect spot for everything. One more thing I wanted to mention before we move on is with the video side of things from the MacBook to the Dell monitor. So sometimes whenever this connection gets moved, this happens. It goes pink. So I'm not exactly sure if it's a connection issue between the MacBook itself or with the adapter, or if it's a faulty VGA cable. That is something we will also have to take a look at. As long as the MacBook is stationary, which it is, the video looks perfectly fine. Sometimes that might happen, but usually you just have to move the cable a bit. It looks great otherwise, especially for VGA. This is an excellent image. It's just a minor thing. I wanted to mention it in case the video kind of looks weird sometimes on camera. It's probably due to either the adapter, either the cable, maybe there's just not a strong enough connection. But enough of that. Let's actually begin with the Power Mac. First things first, we need accessories because this is of course a desktop class machine, and I think the first thing we should talk about is the keyboard. So this is of course the awesome early to mid 2000s Apple keyboard. This example is also really clean. Now this is one of the keyboards that I restored initially. This was also before I actually made videos on stuff like this. I'm pretty sure this is one of the very first keyboards, if not the first keyboard I actually restored. I did learn a lot about how to actually clean keyboards with this. I'm really happy with how it turned out. There is no damage to it whatsoever, at least cosmetically. It does not really have any yellowing. As you can see, the keys are bright white compared to the white on the desk. And in general, it's just an awesome looking keyboard that would also match the Power Mac. However, it does have a couple of downsides. The first thing being is that the cable itself is not long enough. Now, if we had an iMac here, it wouldn't be a problem, but because the Power Mac is on the floor, I do not have the fancy USB extension cable that Apple also provided, if not at least sold separately. I don't have one of those. I do have standard USB extenders, but even with that, I still can't use the keyboard. The reason why is because some of the keys are actually not functional. One of the keys that doesn't work is spacebar itself. Now this would be an awesome candidate for another one of these keyboards that are completely destroyed. Say they have almost no keys, or it has just some kind of major damage that is just not worth repairing. If the electronics are good, I can just swap them over to this. But until that happens, this is mainly just going to sit as is, and I probably will use it as a USB hub because I can just set it on top of the Power Mac unless I decide to do something else with it. The more that I think about it, the more it actually does make sense to leave the keyboard on top of the Power Mac. Now, apart from it looking cool, obviously, I do still get a physical eject key for the DVD drive, physical volume controls, and it is a 2-port USB hub. So this will stay here, but we will have another keyboard on top. By the way, in case you're wondering, a while back, this was more recently than the actual cleaning of the keyboard, but I did disassemble it again. I got down to the actual electronic circuitry that makes up the actual keys, and I did clean everything with isopropyl alcohol, but it did not fix the spacebar issue. So I have tried to fix it, but unfortunately it seems like there's a bad trace or something that is just preventing it from working. So what are we actually going to use as a keyboard for the setup here? Now I have a temporary solution that we will use in this video just to make it look nice, but let me just explain my keyboard situation. So I do have a lot of keyboards available, but most of them that are clean and are ready to go are actually PS2 keyboards. I do also have a ton of USB keyboards, but they all need to be cleaned up just like this one had to. This one was in terrible shape, but as you can see, it has cleaned up very well. Even with the wear and tear on the keys, this is still an excellent keyboard to have, and I'm really happy to have it in the setup here. But just like this keyboard, the rest of the ones I have need to be cleaned up. This is a really janky temporary solution that I came up with. Yeah, just cover the whole keyboard that's already dirty so I can use it without having to wash my hands. We are not going to be using that because that has no place for a clean setup like this. So the keyboard we will actually be using is this keyboard. So you're probably wondering, wait, wasn't that the same keyboard? Yes, I actually do have two of these. So this one, I've explained everything there's to explain about it. I've had it for years. This one I actually got more recently, and I don't really know much about it, but I do know that spacebar works, and I do know that it needs to be cleaned up. So I haven't really done any testing with it, but like I said, I do know that at least the keys are functional. And you might be able to tell that against the white desk, it is in a little bit worse condition than the other one, but it's nothing that a clean shouldn't be able to fix. You can tell that the keys on the clean one are noticeably better than this one, and it does look like there is a lot of dirt and debris on this. I wouldn't be surprised if it cleans up like that, but this is another reason why I don't want this to be a permanent solution as of yet, because, well, it needs to be cleaned up. For today's video, we will be using this in conjunction with this keyboard. With the keyboard sorted, we still need a mouse, and I do have some interesting mice to select from, but just to keep things simple, I'll just be transferring over the Logitech mouse with the mouse pad. All I have to do is just unplug the receiver here, plug it into the whatever keyboard we decide to plug it into, and we will have a functional mouse. And for the monitor situation, we will just stick with the same Samsung monitor that I've been using so far for testing. Like I said, a lot of the setup here is temporary, but it will get us up and running. And even though this doesn't exactly go with the theme of the white desk and the white Apple keyboard, well, it is a monitor, and most of my monitors are for PCs, or they just have, you know, this type of look. The only Apple monitor I have is the aluminum cinema display, and as awesome as it would be with this, I use it way more for YouTube, especially for editing videos with the Mac Mini, so that will stay in my main setup. This will do the job for now, and as cool as it would be to have this acrylic display, unfortunately, I only have a box of the cinema display, so the picture you see here is all that I have. I mean, there is nothing stopping us from using this awesome HP monitor here, except for the fact that it's absolutely gigantic. It probably weighs as much as the Power Mac itself, and there's no way I'm going to place it on top of the brand new desk just for something bad to happen. It's a very cool CRT, I'm happy to have it, but I think we need something even stronger than this to support it. We could always place a smaller CRT monitor that is not actually flat screen. So this one is flat because there's no curve to the glass itself, but the smaller curved CRT monitors do actually weigh less. The Samsung monitor will do the job. Yes, it does look terrible. In comparison, the MacBook setup actually looks pretty good for what it is, and there is an attempt at organization. This, however, is, well, this. From the front here, it actually looks pretty good. Now the two cables here are temporary. This one is the power cable for the iPhone, and that one is the FireWire cable for the external hard drive, because we still need a proper install on this Power Mac. But in terms of the accessories, I'm really happy with how the white keyboard goes with the white desk, but the monitor, the mouse, and the mouse pad definitely have room for improvement. In fact, the AirPort itself actually goes better with the desk than these accessories. But I really like the futuristic 2000s theme that we're going for here. The silver goes really well with the white, but the cable mess is still a cable mess. Now the cables that we are using are obviously from the pre-existing setup, and while it did work at the time, the setup itself has physically gotten bigger. The power cable for the monitor is actually okay because it's closer to the power strip, but the one for the Power Mac barely makes it to the Power Mac itself. I unfortunately do not have the official Apple cable for this, so it will not have the matching white theme that we're going for here, but I do have a bunch of extra power cables on hand, and I will just have to look through those and see what I have available. I will definitely swap them out for longer power cables, but I just have to see what I have. So the cables coming from the monitor and the monitor itself will probably stay the same until I get a better solution for this. I don't want to change out the cable and then change out the monitor because we might be using DVI instead of VGA. I just want to deal with that at the same time instead of dealing it in steps. So that'll stay as it is for now. Hopefully I'll find a better power cable for the Power Mac, and the rest of the cable mess here. The white FireWire cable will go away once we get an internal hard drive and an operating system installed. And in terms of audio, we'll still have an audio cable, but it won't be directly plugged into the mini system here, because I do want to further expand the audio capabilities of this setup using the Switchbox and later integrating hi-fi components like the mini disc deck. So I know there is a lot left to be desired here, but we're getting there one step at a time. What we're gonna do now though is plug in the Power Mac, make sure everything works, and we'll have a fully functional setup. I'm using a DVI to VGA adapter at the moment. This is actually an official Apple one, so it does match the white theme here. So with video plugged in, all we need is audio, FireWire for the boot device, and there is a good click there, the relays inside the power supply. In theory, if we just press the power button and obviously turn on the hard drive, we should have a fully operational Power Mac. Now that is a chime, and any moment we should start booting up. It should go into Sorbet Leopard, although I need to double check with the hard drive. And there we have it, Apple logo on the display. Something that I'm really happy about with how the setup has turned out is the fact that the center area here, where I'm actually using the setup, has a ton more space available now. So the way it was before, obviously the cabinets have not changed at all, but as you may remember, the L extension here, even though it did give me some extra desk space, there was virtually no space underneath for legroom and just general storage. Not only do we have a lot more space available and a lot more desk space available, but the chair itself can easily go inside this section here, and I can easily go from using the Power Mac to the MacBook to whatever we decide to put in this section. There's just a lot more working space available, and it really is a big improvement. It may not seem like much, but when I was using the setup before, I preferred using this area, and it was really inconvenient to use the Power Mac because there just wasn't that much space available. It was never optimized for the Power Mac to begin with because I created the extension just as a little bonus. So I'm really happy with how this has turned out. This is actually looking like a proper setup now. I can't believe I almost forgot this, but this is an essential part of the setup. A white iPhone 3GS to match the white keyboard and the white desk. It also feels like I'm actually using a proper desktop because I have all of this space in front of me, all of that space behind the monitor. The mini system feels like it's miles away, and I have all of this room underneath, so ideally it's going to help out with cable management. Obviously it's nice just to have space underneath, and I can actually move closer with the chair. The chair actually goes underneath the desk as well. I'm guessing that this low power notice is for this keyboard, so it doesn't really bother me because we don't have anything hooked up to this. The dual 2 GHz PowerPC G5 processor. Again, this is Sorbet Leopard, which is why it's 10.5.9. So apparently the low power warning was actually for the keyboard itself and not just the USB hub, because I started to use it and, well, it's not working. We do still have this keyboard though, and if I press eject, it actually does work. So as you can see, the Power Mac is open with several applications. We have iTunes open at the moment, Interweb Power PC. We also have Activity Monitor in the background, even Minecraft, and it's working without a problem. I think at this point the biggest bottleneck is actually the hard drive itself, because As cool as FireWire is, I don't want this to be the only hard drive on this machine, but man, this is cool. So the speakers themselves are also not an issue, even though you can't even see them because the monitor is obviously blocking them. Sound is not a problem at all. It sounds awesome, and I can always control it with the remote control, because that's what it's for. And the iPhone is just there looking awesome alongside the keyboard, which is non-functional. Pretty funny considering, you know, we tried to get a working spacebar and now we don't even have a keyboard. But like I said, this is still just the beginning. There is so much potential here. The Power Mac is incredibly efficient considering, you know, it's a Power PC Mac, and as you can see, we have 512 megabytes of RAM. We still have 15 megabytes just sitting there doing nothing, considering we have two relatively intensive applications open for a machine of this age. Not to mention iTunes as well in the background. I can't wait to use this even more. It still feels crazy to actually have a proper desk setup because for the longest time, I've always been dealing with just this setup, and as awesome as it is very cool to have this one right alongside it. When I started this video, I thought that this would be relatively straightforward and pretty similar to the other videos I've made in the series so far. Little did I know that this would be one of the longest videos, if not the longest video to date on the iTunes library itself, and in general on the channel, which is absolutely crazy to think. And if you watched the entire video so far, then you are definitely dedicated to the iTunes library, and I can't thank you enough. It is also crazy and really cool to see that the channel itself already has 1,000+ subscribers, and I can't wait to make even more videos for you guys. I can't tell you how happy I am to see this setup evolve and become what it is today. The addition of this desk alone will make videos much easier to make, especially for large items like the Power Mac. This would have been impossible to film in the current setup as it is, and as much as I love the desk setup with the Mac Mini and the cinema display, beyond an iPhone or an iPad, there's no way I can film anything in that area. It is very cool to see this evolve. I can't wait to use this machine more. I can't wait to use the setup even more. And I still have so many extra things I can add to this setup. And there will definitely be more parts to this series. I still feel like this is only just the beginning. And even though we have made improvements in the past, such as this extra L extension, it's obviously not being utilized to its full potential. Everything you see here was just sitting around, not being used properly. It all began with the MacBook and the hard drive, and everything just evolved from there. So if you enjoyed today's video, and you haven't already left a thumbs up because this is one crazy video, then consider doing that. And if you haven't subscribed yet, then consider subscribing. If you are super dedicated to this as well, I also have a Discord server, which I've had for quite a while now. If you want to join the Discord, there is a link in the description down below. Stay tuned for further updates and developments. There is so much I want to do with this setup. There is so much I want to do with the Power Mac. This still needs to get its own dedicated video, if not video series, because we still need to clean the inside of this guy, install a hard drive, maybe max it out with extra upgrades and cool things like that. But the addition of this desk alone has made that entirely possible. You guys saw how it was before. It was usable, but now it's honestly incredible to see this in action. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.